Hi, everybody. This is Christelle Estrada, and it's 11 o'clock. We're going to have approximately, we'll see if it's an hour long. If we finish early, that's fine. I'm going to be monitoring questions, so you should feel free to ask questions. I want to introduce Michelle Eldridge Wall, or Wall Eldridge, or whatever it is. And as you know from our ALS directors meeting, Michelle has she was put in a position, and I'll just say this as a way of someone who has systematically and pragmatically thought about the way to create inclusive school environments in relationship to the commitment from Provo School District. And the fact that she went into that position, as many of you know that I did, and there just were a lot of systems and processes and procedures that were unclear. So the way in which she works with helping people ensure that English learners and those who are the most vulnerable have the best opportunity for a high quality education, and has really worked hard on that. And because of the finally approved Title III plan, as you know, the first two elements have been approved, and then the third one, which is based on technical assistance for ensuring that students understand academic language in the content areas and are making annual growth goals. That piece we're still working on, and I sent some things out to you for feedback. We have 15 days to respond, which on the 29th we'll submit the new plan with our commitment to ensuring that the kind of support LEAs need around quality instructional programs for English learners to access ELA, mathematics, and science. We're really working on that as a team. So one way to do that is to highlight some best practices and practices that, are moved systemically toward eliminating those kinds of barriers. So that's why we have Michelle here. So thanks, Michelle.
Okay, so hi, everyone. Christelle asked me today to come and just share our identification process in Provo. Oops. Should I turn that off?
No, it's mine.
Okay. Go ahead. Just as a side note to what Christelle mentioned, when I started in Provo, we had just prior to me taking the position, we had been in an audit and had some pretty major findings. So though I would love to talk about classroom instruction more than registration process, one of the reasons why we had to focus on this at the beginning rather than classroom instruction and what was happening in classrooms, we didn't all know as a district who our ELL students were, and there was some misidentification, some over-identification between special ed and ELL. So we had pretty gigantic identification problems. So in order to get to that classroom instruction piece, we had to find out first who these kids were and make sure we were all on the same page. I am happy to say now most of our focus is all on classroom instruction, which is pretty exciting and awesome. So just to walk you through our identification process today. So the screen you're looking at right now, I just typed up for all of you just to see kind of a quick overview, but in our district, we have, so just that first little line there, it is a requirement, and that requirement is given by our executive council that all parents register online in Provo. So whether that's a transfer student or new to our district, online registration is a requirement. In order to help parents with that, the schools all have computers in the offices, both laptops if they needed to be taken into a private room or a room with parents, and as well as usually most of them have kind of a little bank of computers. So translation is available. Our website is translated by itself. With a click of a button it can be translated, but also the schools all have to have someone in the school who can help a parent side by side if they can't do it at home. So I would say the majority of our parents, once they find out it's online, like to do it at home, but we certainly provide the support at the schools if that's necessary. So that started 4 years ago. And in that process, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit to my page. I have to also give a gigantic shout out to our tech department. and specifically two people there, Eugene Paulson and Bruce Harmon, who are over Power School and specifically work a lot for me with our ESL information. They are incredibly responsive, and I could not do this. I could have not and could continue not to do it without their incredible support. So they really are the ones, they're the master techie people behind all this. I just kind of say, here's what I need, help me get it. So with that said, our online registration, as part of that, parents have to fill out the home language survey questions. And I'm going to just show you on my end. I hope I click the right buttons here. Oops, that's the one you're looking at. Sorry, everyone. So when parents, I don't have a screenshot of what the parents fill out. Theirs looks a little bit different, but after they fill it out, I can see on my end a screen that looks like this. All the schools also have access to a screen that looks like this. So anything with a red asterisk is a required field. So on the parent side of things, they don't see it in a list like this. They just see one. Oh, is that bad? They just see one screenshot or one shot. So I'm not sure if you can still see the screen or not.
No, they can't.
I'm guessing not.
So
keep
say we're waiting.
Sorry, we're waiting for tech support to come in. I don't know what I hope I didn't click on. Okay, please hold.
Sorry, just put some candy in my mouth.
So while we're waiting for the tech, I just want to say to everyone, because of the new requirement in relationship to English learners meeting academic goals for the accountability system, both federal and state, it's really important that at the district level, the ALS directors and people in ed equity work very closely with the curriculum directors and the content specialists. That's pretty much a non-negotiable. Since that's what the peer reviewers said we weren't doing, and we weren't providing the kind of technical assistance from our end to support LEAs to do that. There shouldn't be this divide between, okay, here's the ed equity department and the ALS support people, and then the content specialists in the curriculum department. So this piece is very critical, and that's what any federal audits will be focusing on, as well as when the team for monitoring comes to your schools with the feeder pattern with students, with the most EL students. So all the elementary schools with EL students to the middle school, with the most EL students to the high school. That's why we're focusing on instruction in the content areas in relationship to that support that's necessary based on the feedback we got from the ESSA plan. So I just want to make sure that you're clear, and then the responsibility is that I will also be focusing on working with the curriculum directors through the teaching and learning department here, and with the teaching and learning department here to help the content specialists really better understand what scaffolded instruction would look like to ensure that English learners have access to academic content. So I'm just saying that because that's one of the key things we all have to focus on this next year for the beginning of implementation.
Okay, so like I said, the parent screen is much more clear, user-friendly than what you're looking at. This is an admin side of PowerSchool, but I want to just draw your attention to the section right there where my mouse is flying around. So when a parent sees this, when they do the online registration, they just see one question. It just says, is a native language other than English fluently used in the home? And that's our first question on our home language survey. It's a required field. You can see the double asterisks there. That means in our system, those fields are required by any parent. So they can't move on in the registration process until that question is answered.
Explain why that question.
And our question, I just lost you again. Our question is a little bit worded differently in Utah Valley and Provo, where we are, the dominant religion there being the LDS religion. If we don't phrase that question correctly, we end up getting a lot of parents who are former missionaries for the church and speak another language. We get a lot of them saying yes to another language being spoken in the home if we're not super specific on how exactly we phrase that. So we've gotten permission from the state office to rephrase. Oh, it's Christelle, it's back up. To rephrase that a little differently, and that has helped filter, for the most part, it's helped filter out the lots of LDS missionaries who speak foreign languages, probably not fluently in the home. So that helped a lot in our process. So if a parent says yes to that, then they're asked the next two questions. If yes, select the language. What's the language first spoken by the student? What language is most often spoken? And then was the child born outside the USA? And then date of enrollment. So those questions on our home language survey, all required by every parent. The following questions, these follow-up questions, are not asked if they say no. This screen is an odd screenshot that my tech people sent, bless their hearts, but what this tells me, if I see a yes here, I should always see these fields filled out. However, what this tells me is that this is most likely somebody, probably a sixth grader or older, who we didn't start online registration until 4 years ago. So prior to 4 years ago, we still had the box that said is another language spoken in the home that a registrar might have filled out after paper. So this tells me the student has not they have not done the online registration just because of where they're at in their schooling. So probably not a new student, probably someone in our system who's been there for a long time. So it doesn't freak me out very much, just kind of knowing our process.
Okay, so in the WebEx meeting that I did, I think it was last week, and we were going over the questions. The home language survey, there are 4 questions in the ESSA plan that you have to absolutely ask, specifically in relationship to refugee background, right? But if your context is different, like obviously, Provo is different, and the system they're using doesn't over-identify or under-identify students who need English language services, then those kinds of permissions obviously are allowable. One of the reasons we went to those 4 standard questions is that in the previous EL master plan, which no longer exists, so I'll say that again, the EL master plan no longer exists because it was on No Child Left Behind, just gave all kinds of suggestions about whatever you can do. Okay, so that's no longer acceptable for lots of reasons. What's acceptable is that those 4 questions in the ESSA plan help identify families with refugee background, because we don't have accurate data, and we're going to provide professional learning opportunities for secretaries and registrars to do that if they don't have an online system like Provo. So the point is not over-identification and under-identification or violating the rights of parents by someone making a decision about who should be assessed. So just to be clear that those are the reasons we've done this.
We are adding to this section here, the refugee question. And actually, in talking with our instructional council, there's other departments in the district that would like that information. So we will actually most likely not have that refugee question here. We're probably going to put that on the main demographic page so that all departments can access that information. So we will be adding that actually probably next week. So that question's coming. So this information, once it's gathered from our office, then our office, we can generate a report from that data. So the process then is every Friday, our office runs a report. Probably we call it the float report because float was called home language survey for a billion years. So if I say that word, sorry. So we run the float report, and this screenshot is what that report generates from Power School. So we're able to get a lot of the data that we need from Power School, which is so great. So this shot, I'm going to open it up in Excel so you can see a little bit better of a view, I hope. So this is the information gathered for every school. We run this data. So let me just explain this. The blue rows at the top are fields that are generated by our office through Power School. White are the fields that the contacts at the school have to fill out. So basically what happens is we get this home language survey information, we generate this report, and then we share this report with each school's ELL supervisor. I've shared with you before how we have an ELL supervisor at every school. That supervisor is a administrator type of role. So some schools it actually is an assistant principal who's also over ELL. But they are not classroom teachers. They are in some sort of admin role. So we share we share this through our database system. It's not an Excel document, but it looks like one. So we generate the report on Friday, and then we email each supervisor and a quick email that says, please check your float report. And then they have to follow up on that report. So the schools they're accountable for the white columns. So you can see the basic demographic information there that's given. You can see this column that says, is the student new to the country this year? Typically, we get that information from PowerSchool as well, but we ask the schools to double check. It's not a required field in PowerSchool for various reasons, but we have learned that a lot of times a new family is new to the country and maybe they're not caught in PowerSchool the right way. So we ask the schools to double check that information.
Okay, so here's a question from someone. It says, do you know if USBE folks that handle Aspire know to add the refugee question to Aspire for districts that use that in their SIS and for registration? So I just want you to know that I'm revising all the coding UTREX descriptions to help address this problem of not appropriately identifying refugee families. And so once that's done, so I'm working on that. I actually have the document. I'm doing all the editing, taking out No Child Left Behind, putting all the ESSA requirements in there and making it a little bit clearer about how to identify. And I just want you to know that this has been an issue around civil rights issues with people collecting citizenship information, which is against the law. Okay. And you know that we had that other issue where Aspire misunderstood because of the confusion between how immigrant is federally defined for funding purposes, because there's a percentage that comes off of Title III, and then who's eligible for that based on a formula that was approved by the feds, and then what immigration means, because they thought that was about citizenship. So we're trying to revise the entire UTREX coding system that's clear, run it by people, and then work with all the IT and tech people here, as well as providing online professional learning for all the secretaries and registrars, so that we're all on the page. And that's our responsibility to help people, right? That's what we're undergoing. So I just want you to know that we've thought about that. I've made all the connections between student privacy, with the Assistant Attorney General, with the data and statistics people, with the IT people. So now it's just coming together in one document that everyone will know how to use and to better understand. So I just want to address that for you. So sorry to interrupt, Michelle.
Okay. So the schools find out this information, the ELL supervisor, it's their job to fill these columns in. So are they new to the country this year? This next column says CUME folder check, proficiency from previous school. So you all know that federally we have 30 days. Our district goal is within 2 weeks. So they have these names stay on the list all year, but we monitor these names every week, and they update when they get a CUME folder check. And then language accurately marked. So sometimes we have parents that mismark, and before we screen, we want to make sure that they're accurately marked. And this isn't a huge process. Typically, the ELL supervisors are really good with knowing the families in the school. So typically, this is just our double check of, are you sure we need to screen this one? Occasionally, we have a family who marks yes, and they might have marked yes for their kindergartner, but all other siblings have never had a yes marked on there. So we try to flag those ahead of having a parent call and say, why did you test my student that was muted anyway. They're not ELL or something like that. So it's just a quick check. And then the blue column is from our office. Once the school has answered those 3 columns from our office, we give a permission to give the screener. They're not allowed, I guess I would say, to give the screener assessment until there is a yes in that column. And that's just confirming that we're not going to misidentify someone or screen someone that should not be screened. And this is permission to give the model. We use the model for kindergarten testing, so same questions, basically those are kindergartners. And then after the testing is done, our office fills out the next, or the schools fill out the next columns when they gave the test, the scores for listening, speaking, reading, and writing, overall proficiency, and any other information they might want to include. We include this here for reasons like, the student might have like incredibly high, these scores might be incredibly high, but let's say their DIBELS is incredibly low. So this is other data points that a school might want to include. If their overall proficiency comes back at a 5 or a 6 and the school and the teacher are saying, yeah, no, this is a problem we don't want to not identify, that gives the school an opportunity to type a little what else is going on. And then again, the blue columns are us, so we update PowerSchool with the current ELL information. The schools don't need to do that. And then we document the date that we send home an identification letter to the parents, and that comes from our office. The letter says to contact the school and ELL supervisor, but we just handle that processing just from our office, so one less thing for the schools to do. So let me explain a couple more things on this sheet. The pink, sorry, it's kind of obnoxious, but the pink means that student is totally finished with all identification. So from an administrative standpoint, and I look at this school, this is Amelia Earhart's report. Currently, he has, if I scroll down at this school, they have 3 students who have not been identified yet in the process. So I can, as a quick look up and see, oh great, Amelia Earhart looks like all their new kids are being monitored fine. I can look over at the date here and see, oh, well, these little pukas just got registered on December 2nd. So, and then school got out last week. So for us, that's just our way of monitoring that 2-week time frame we kind of give ourselves of checking. So the coordinators or the supervisors at the school love the color coding because when they pull up their list, they can see, oh, I'm done with all these pink ones and I just have 1 or 2 white kiddos to do. Obviously, the beginning of the school year, the list is ginormous, so it's a longer list to look through, but typically during the year, it's maybe 1 or 2 students per week at a school. The gray means that student transferred out of our district within the process. We keep record of all of this every year so that in case any parent calls or anybody else calls, we just have a record of everything that's going on at a school. So then at the bottom, we have some other tabs that are also really important. So this is called our need investigation tab. So again, all these kids are taken from that home language survey in PowerSchool. This next list is same, and as from the same screen, we can get data from PowerSchool of all of the students who've transferred to that school from that are already identified as English language learners. So we have a lot of transfer within our district students, especially in our low-income neighborhoods. So they'll go from basically one apartment complex to another apartment complex across town, but within the district. So on our float report, we can see transfers. So we always want to make sure the schools know these kids are new to your school this week, but they've already been identified as ELL. So that's what that page is. And you can see, let's see, it says how many transfers that student has had within the district. So these higher numbers are kind of large. I'm sorry, I'm distracted now. 4 transfers, and it's a first grader. So anyway, so helpful information for the schools to have there. And then this column, you can see this school, well, wasn't out current when I pulled this. The requirement for the ELL supervisor is to mark yes or no and the date they notified the teacher of this student being an ELL student. So that's a really important part of our process to make sure the teachers know you got this new student this week who is an ELL student and already identified. Our hope is that the teachers don't themselves have to seek that information out after having the student in their class for 4 weeks. So this should be updated right here, and typically is actually. So that requirement to update the teacher. And then the last tab we have right here is for student inquiry. So Again, sorry for the obnoxious pink. That means the investigation is done. But this tab is for ELL supervisors to be able to fill out if a teacher or maybe administrator even comes to the ELL supervisor and says, oh, I think this student's not on my ELL list, or this student is not ELL on my grade book. I think they're ELL. We have a process for investigating those students. So we call it student inquiry. The ELL supervisor fills out this form for us, and they have to have, we've trained them all throughout the years to make sure that when this happens, they have to ask, what's your evidence of the student being ELL? So a teacher would have to say things, for example, like at parent-teacher conferences, the parent needed a translator. That would be an example. That happens actually. This page gets filled out almost always after parent-teacher conferences, which is exactly where this is from right here. That was the week after parent-teacher conferences. So almost always it's realizing there was a translator needed. You can see actually all of these were that at parent-teacher conferences, So this is our way to help teachers when they realize there might be something going on at home. We have other things like grandma speaks Samoan, and they heard the student speaking about that in small group reading one day or something like that. So we just require evidence of that, and then we determine if that evidence is allowable to then screen that student for ELL. We also require the school administrator to call home and double check that evidence. So we don't call, we ask the principals to call and just double check the evidence that's given to us. So we also check Power School and things like that. Often for us, it's a sibling who missed identification somehow, and 5 other siblings are already identified. So those ones we don't call home on, but that's a big one in our district that sometimes happens. A mom gets helped with registration, and older brother or sister did it and clicked no for some random reason. So that's kind of how we cover our basis as far as all making sure all kids are screened, or I mean not screened, but identified in our district. So that's what our report looks like. I don't know what else. Other questions or?
So we're just checking to see, we're just going to pause for a minute and see if there are other questions. So one of the biggest issues, because it's also a civil rights issue, is that students who are misidentified, for example, because they're English learners, but people assume it's special ed issues. This is one of the reasons why we have systems to make sure that those kinds of things don't happen. Besides the fact that if there is a student who is an EL student, who is an English learner, as well as needing special needs services, special education services, it's a civil rights issue in relationship to providing both those services. It's called the dual services provision in the civil rights law, which is really important. So that's why this whole thing about over-identifying, misidentifying, under-identifying, these things are really important and should be taken very seriously in relationship, not just because it's civil rights law, I mean, that's just the guidance, right? But to really look and refine the processes by which it becomes effective to really support families and children in getting the best quality education that they deserve. That's really the point. So I wanted to completely move us away from all this kind of compliance language, because even though it is a compliance language and it is a violation of civil rights law, that's not why we do this. We do this because we're committed to the quality educational experiences of every single child. Those are family values in Utah. That's what we're committed to. So I just want to make sure that we understand this is not about a got you. This is not about compliance. This is not about, getting audited and having to respond to findings. It's really about supporting the way in which we change systems to ensure quality education for every single student. That's really the point.
So I'll just show you a few more documents that help us just procedurally and with policy. This document you're looking at right now is our identification placement flow chart, basically. So this is shared with every school every year, every teacher every year, every administrator every year. Every school has a PD that they do with their whole staff that explains this process. So that's that's our identification graphic organizer, I guess is the best thing to call that. Very helpful in explaining to teachers and even honestly parents, so they can kind of see the overall flow of how they get in and out. We are looking at a second identification, not just using the WIDA screener and model. Right now, we just use that unless a school has other information. We have not found an error often. We have not found very many over-identification problems in our district. So, but we are working on a second layer of helping us ensure that it's ELL, not maybe someone who is just struggling. So that will hopefully be coming for us next year. The next document, just to show you that will be included in all this, is this. This is a one-page handout of what I just explained to you. So our ELL supervisors get this one-page handout, and this is the training that we do with them. So this just tells them at the school level what they do. So this explains step 1, we get a float report every single week. We run it, you don't need to run it. Step 2, we report the communication to the schools. It explains each tab right here that I just explained to you. And then step 3, we give the screener or the model, and step 4, the results are shared in a letter sent home. So everything I just explained to you is on this one-page handout. So again, all teachers, all principals, all schools are shared this information at the beginning of the year, and then our supervisors update as we go. So that's our identification process. The other thing that I wanted that Crystal asked me to share is just a little bit on PowerSchool. We've developed an electronic portfolio or electronic ELL folder. We got rid of our red folders probably 3 or 4 years ago because they were pointless. So most of the things in the red folders were screenshots from PowerSchool and things. So we've switched it all to having it in our student information system. So let me just show you a screenshot of what that looks like. This is a student's ESL page in PowerSchool, and this is updated and maintained by our office. You can see the date the placement test was given to the student, their language. So just their demographic information pulled from that demographic part of PowerSchool. This is where we see another language is spoken in the home. Again, that comes from the survey information given to parents. But this is where our critical information is for their folder in a sense. You can see right here we've documented the parent notification letter has been sent. Our one change this year is we're adding in this description column which letter they were sent. Mm-hmm. I know what letter because I can look here and know the year, and most of the supervisors know, but not all. So we're adding a line here that says it was their placement letter, or it's an exit letter, or a monitor letter. So we're adding the kind of letter sent right here. And then down here you can see their year of programs. So you can see 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. You can see they were a 1, then a 2, then a 4, then a 3. We know access changed here, so that's not shocking. And then you can see down here the tests that were administered. I'm not live in PowerSchool, but if I were, I could actually click on this access button right here. I could click on it and it would open up their access results. So they're immediately linked. You can also see them right here, but I can see another view of them. If I click, those are all linked there, as is another field for all of these hot links here. It opens up more detailed information for that student. So this is really our ELL electronic portfolio. Our instruction type is right here, but for all of our kids, they really are getting sheltered within the classroom for the most part, except some secondary pullouts. So, so that's our ESL screen, which has really been a great tool for us and for administrators and really for teachers. Teachers see the same information. It looks different, but they see the same information in their PowerSchool teacher side of things. So they can see how long a student's been ELL, and all the access information is hot linked right there. So,
okay, so this is another point I want to make, and that the which is interesting because when the feds were on the phone call looking at Title I, the first thing they said was, okay, so you actually haven't put in the timeline for EL proficiency in Title I. And so then I had to tell the Title I person, okay, well, that's in Title III. And we'll just take what we put in Title III and put it into Title I. Now, the reason this is important is that ESSA was very, very clear, the legislation, in relationship to an ambitious goal. And we put in the ambitious goal toward English proficiency as 3 years. Now we know that's like incredibly ambitious, right? Then we put in, based on these other variables, which is the level of proficiency at the time of enrollment, the grade level, and literacy in their first language. We talked about those variables in relationship to a 5 to 7 year period. And then in the plan that I sent out, because that section was approved, the annual interim goals are set for 2022. For elementary, which is separate from high school, and that's intentionally. Obviously, I don't think I would have to explain that to you either. But the whole point is, the ultimate question is, why is it that someone comes in who's an English learner and they end up being a long-term English learner in schools for 5, 6, 7 years? Okay, so pretty much ESSA has said no. That you need to check that and see what's going on, and you can't fund programs that aren't producing different results, whether it's the formula that you use to allocate supplemental funds from Title III, or because it's a civil rights issue and it doesn't really matter if you get supplemental funds or not, you're still accountable, right, for ensuring that students are meeting growth goals every year so that they can not only be reclassified as English proficient, but then have access to academic English in a content area. That's really the point that we got caught on. So I'm just trying to make this really clear for you to see how this is all connected. And the reasoning behind it. And I had a focus group with parents, Spanish-speaking parents yesterday, because I'm on this early college committee. And I just want to tell you, there were 30 Spanish-speaking parents there, grandmothers, mothers, and they were pretty clear that they felt that their students were not being challenged academically and prepared. So then we have to look at ourselves. Instead of looking at the community or looking at the child, you know, that's the role of being a professional educator in providing quality educational experiences. It's the outcomes for the kids, right? So I just want to connect this all and refocus this on it.
Thanks, Christelle. I think I would just add a little bit to that of, again, in Provo, we have found that we couldn't do that unless we knew who they were. So this identification process for us was so critical. And I don't honestly think I realized how critical it was until I was in the middle of it and realizing now that we have this really clear, now we know who to teach, now we know what curriculum to provide, and we know what professional development to provide, and teachers really are asking more questions. So it really honestly, it felt so tasky and laborious and not important because I just wanted to get to instruction. But this is really what mattered, honestly, more than what was happening there at first. I want to share. Oh, do you want to say something?
Yeah, we have another question.
Oh.
The question is, their electronic portfolio has no academic data.
No, not in the screen. Not in this screen. So there's another screen in PowerSchool where there is the academic data. So we wanted to keep ESL just ESL. So within PowerSchool, actually, there's another link that their academic data is connected to the student in PowerSchool. So we can get to it really easily. I don't know, maybe we should put it there. We could put a hot link to it. The one thing I did want to show you that is new for us this year is this monitor code. So we have gone through and we have checked all of our monitor students, and we've added new codes here where we can have an M, and this M means an M. They're in their first year of monitor. We now have M, M2, M3, M4. So when a teacher or student or principal runs a report to see who are my ELL students and what are their proficiency levels, we now have it really clear they're in their third year of being monitored, their fourth year, or wherever they're at. And then we actually have a monthly check with those students and through their ELL supervisors to see how their academic progress is going. I guess here would be an example if you look down at the students' last access scores. they have a little bit of an issue with those reading and listening things that doesn't really make them a 5. So we're really becoming, this year, our new goal was to be really strategic about our M's, our monitor students. So we have it really clear that those kids could be reassessed if a school really felt like they needed to be, and helping them identify which students maybe are or missed that recalibration with the access scores that were 5s 2 years ago and probably aren't 5s anymore with the new calibration. So that M status has really helped us this year, and seeing more gives us more information about monitor students. So I think that's all I have there.
Okay, so we have time for questions. The other thing I want to make clear is, and I've said this before, but I guess I'll say it again, the point about monitoring is important, especially since ESSA was very clear that the state education agency isn't providing enough support for what happens in regular classrooms when students are reclassified as English proficient. Now, the reason that's important is teaching academic conversations and academic English in content area classrooms and regular classrooms. We can provide you the resources, but the kind of professional development that has to happen with teachers at the middle school and high school is really important. We can't, because the issue is, because it's a part of state accountability, you realize that if kids aren't making their academic growth goals, and they've been reclassified as English proficient, and we have a great opportunity because 2017, the WIDA access was recalibrated to focus on career and college readiness. And all the ALS directors are really clear that this is a good thing. And the reason it's a good thing, it's going to better help us support students who were reclassified as English proficient in moving toward really using and understanding academic English in the subject areas, mathematics, science, and English language arts. So, we have a really big task ahead of us. We can't really make the excuse now, I've heard this, oh, they don't have any accent, they speak really well. Okay, well, that has no relationship to performing in the use of academic terms and academic English in mathematics or science. That has nothing to do with it. One is basic interpersonal communication skills, and then the other is being designated as English proficient with the new recalibrated scores, and how that, for the purpose of that, is to ensure that students are making gains in the end of level standards-based assessment, which is currently SAGE. So just to be really clear, that's where we're getting stuck. And teachers, and I'm saying this because I run into this, teachers who want to protect their English learners and keep them protected, okay, is not helping. This is a civil rights issue about segregative classrooms and which kids have access to, I'll give you an example, 9th grade biology, and which kids don't. Okay, you can't segregate your English learners all into earth science. That's just one example. Okay, so that's a violation. So the whole point is, if we want, the board has this indicator, these 6 indicators for Education Elevated, the board and the state legislature. It's called Education Elevated. Everything is aligned to those 6 goals. And I sent a PowerPoint out that showed the gap. In every indicator with graduation, academic content, English learners are at the bottom, below special ed students. Now, we can't really argue with the data because we know there's some issues. So the most courageous thing to do is to not get defensive and to work together. So that's kind of my Christmas spiel, or my holiday spiel, or whatever. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle? So I want to thank Michelle in particular. And I think the key point here is you have to do a lot of front-end work in the way in which you identify English learners and the kind of support that they need and how you monitor them. Whatever your SIS system is, whatever you're doing, right, really use this as kind of an exemplar to support the kind of work that teachers are going to do in the classroom, right? Think about it systemically. And this is how resources should be used to impact student outcomes. I'll have Michelle come back because I did this a long time ago when I showed the examples of the school plans and the teams that work with English learners. Okay, well now that's in our ESSA plan. So that means y'all are going to have to do it. So you can't blame Michelle. It just makes sense because the way in which you allocate resources will help the students. The districts will support the students in meeting and using braided funds to address the needs of English learners so they can meet their annual growth goals. I mean, that's pretty much how simple it is. You're just using your resources in a strategic way, supporting your teachers and your schools in the way you allocate resources to ensure that every single student meets their annual growth goals. So I don't know what else to say other than, in a sentence, that's what we're doing. Okay, happy holidays and Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Eid, and all those other wonderful celebrations. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.